Writing for me is a way of making the airy matter of thought feel real. I can open up a notebook and solidify my feelings, which otherwise seem to float around my head, ill-defined, mutable. It is a necessary act of anchoring. I'm not remotely sorry that I attempted to tether myself to the unknown language of my new degree by writing it all down, and I've rarely been sorry since. So there is a lot of evidence to suggest that you can tether yourself to an experience, you can anchor yourself, you can come to some excellent rules is the wrong word, guiding principles for you as a professional if you can add some language, get a clear narrative in your head of something that happened. And if you look at the work of researchers like Pennebaker doing 2 freehand sessions, like freestyle sessions, writing about an event that you found difficult, like 20 minutes long, a few days apart. People who do that have wildly different, better outcomes a year later compared to people who weren't able to do that. And I find that really, really interesting. So that's part of why written reflections are so important for us. But we've just talked about the fact that sometimes the reflecting we do academically is a little different from what we would do in our personal life. So I'm coming on to that. Right. So this is the Gibbs cycle. Graham Gibbs actually has a YouTube channel. He's a qualitative researcher, and I'm sure we've all felt a little frustrated and like the Gibbs cycle is quite dry, but if you see him presenting, he's totally on our side. He gets it. He's an education researcher, and what he was trying to do and what others are trying to do with these cycles are they want a reliable and easily replicated way of getting you to learn something. Because what else can they do? They've got this, if we think about when midwifery was put into statute and became a course and became like a registered profession. So you've got the, was it 1902 Midwives Act? You've got knowledge, clinical knowledge that you want these people to have. You also want them to be of good health and good character, which is the very old-fashioned terminology that the NMC still use. And there has to be a way of checking what these individuals are doing and what their internal world is like over the course of training. And you could say, well, we do that in placement all the time anyway, because whoever we're working with is picking up how we interact with the clients, like how we do those clinical skills, how we offer informed choice and consent and all of that stuff. Like we could definitely say that kind of thing is covered, but it would feel it feels very wrong to me to have the academic theory side of learning just completely cut away any, I guess, way of capturing emotional intelligence around the learning process. It feels wrong to me that we would have none of that involved in our academic work at all. And so based on qualitative research, people like Graham Gibbs were trying to look at what are the discrete stages when students actually learn well, because, you know, a lot of the time, our learning attempts are unsuccessful, right? Like that's a big part of being a student, is having the tolerance for keeping turning up and trying again, because sometimes it's just not going to happen. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, I think what's a good example for me, annulation was really, really tricky for me to begin with. And no matter how many times I did it and it felt like I was doing the right thing, it just wouldn't flip and go into the vein. But like those attempts still very much counted towards my learning. Like you have to do that stuff. But when we are able to make progress in our learning, what have the different stages look like? How did they all come together? And after a lot of looking at the way students learn and looking at results and looking at the looking at the way people retain knowledge, it was these kind of steps that seem to be popping up. So what they're trying to get you to do is map your experiences onto something evidence-based. You're going to have to think about your emotions. This is one thing that they want to see. They want to see who you are as a person, your emotional landscape and how that is impacted on the care you've given, and then an action plan at the end for how you're going to address that. So we have the wonderful wheel of emotions. Now, there is no agreement within education or emotions research in terms of how many emotions there are, but I really like this as a way of starting. And there is evidence to suggest, I don't know if I put this quote together in the end. I don't think I did, but there's evidence to suggest that if you can identify with words what you are feeling, then you are beginning, like the neurobiology research suggests, that you are beginning to put that into a clear narrative, and with a little bit of distance, you're able to address that the next time it happens. So you can either be feeling something really good about your care. So it might be that you're, reassured by the situation, and taking a step back and doing the writing about it for a reflection will let you see that structure and internalize it, and then it will be more readily available for you the next time you come across that situation. You will slide into that reassurance, which will be helpful. You'll have more energy for what you're doing in front of you. And if you are feeling something not great, so maybe, I think we've all felt ridiculed in practice at one time or another, like that would be nice if it never happened, but like that's, I don't know, could just be me. You can overrule me on that, but I think ridicule is something that we feel in the NHS. Hopefully we're working on that. But like, if you can see it and have a clear narrative about where it came from, it can feel like we're just complaining about things and things never change. But there is actually really good research to suggest that having the words to wrap around things is beneficial in itself. And what was the other thing I was going to mention about emotions here? Oh yeah, did you know that the guess how many emotions adults can identify as they're feeling reliably? Give me a number, both of you. How many emotions do you think? Okay, 5. Luana, what do you reckon? Like, okay, so if you follow an adult around and they are going through their day feeling things, as we all do, we are feeling machines, and you say to them, what are you feeling right now? Like, on average, how many emotions do you think human adults can reliably identify as they're happening to them? So it's 3. It's 3. We do happy, sad, and pissed off. And I'm quoting Brene Brown, who's a qualitative researcher that I have an awful lot of time for. She's a social worker, sociologist person in the US. But I think that's absolutely amazing. Our ability to navigate our emotions as adults in society as it stands today. Maybe in the past, when we had more religious language to wrap around things, perhaps we were better at this. I'm not quite sure. I'm unclear on why this is. But like, it's absolutely amazing to me that these are all of the ones that emotions researchers have identified, and we live here, here, and here. So it's like when you have small children, you're trying to get them to a lot of the difficulty with small children is they can't express themselves in a way that helps you help them. And when you're trying to hang out with a 5-year-old, like my nephew, it would be so much easier if when he was crying, he could say, I was playing with this toy and I really liked the toy, and then it did a thing I wasn't expecting and it broke and I feel betrayed. And you could unpack that with him, but he won't. He'll just be like, ah. And it's the same with us. It's the same with us in practice. We think we're these, big, complex creatures, and we are feeling these things. We are feeling all of these things, but we can't harness the nuance in the moment. So when it comes to writing your reflection, if you can talk about a few things that you were feeling, and you have to do it in a professional way. That's the other really irritating thing. When it comes to writing, it's written in first person when you're writing the emotional bit particularly, and reflections more than any other piece of work, case studies more than any other piece of work are written in first person. And there's a good one actually, Luana, if you look at midwifediaries.com, there is an essay, a case study written by Melissa Newman, and you can access the entire thing. And it was a first class essay, so that might be quite useful for you to have a look at. But yeah, just if you can, you kind of go through 3 stages. You identify your emotions, you write them down, and then you write them down in an academic way. And what that means is you're trying to get this quite subjective thing that is emotional, what you were feeling emotionally, into an objective manner. So I needed to go back to the drawing board. There's a certain like shrug of the shoulders, oh God, frustrated. And then if we unpack that further, it turns into the reassurance and information I've provided was helpful, but not comprehensive enough to support the client, meaning I needed to ask a qualified professional to step in. This was disappointing. So do you see like a lot of this stuff is just not taking your first answer when it comes to writing professionally and critical analysis. I try and have a policy of asking myself, if I think something looks a bit wishy-washy on the page, I'll ask myself, what do I actually mean by this? 3 times, and I'll go with my third answer, not the first answer, while knowing that 3 times thing, that's hard, and it will feel like I'm not getting anywhere while I'm doing it. But then when you come back to your third answer, it tends to be, you're like, oh, no, actually, that's quite good. No, I like that. Does that make sense? That policy for writing reflections. Cool. Yeah, and the other thing is, choose safe examples. Choose safe examples for university. So what I mean by this is if there are any issues with confidentiality, if they're going to figure out who this person is, get to your personal tutor, get to the person who's marking it, and be really clear about what you want to cover and whether that is going to be fine to do. And there can also be other stuff, like if you had a clinical incident that everybody learned from, if you don't make it clear in your reflection that incident forms went in, the right people knew, all of those things we need to do to keep clients safe, you are likely going to be marked down on that. And I have seen that before. So it's just remembering that this is because what choice do the lecturers have, I guess? Like, they have to make sure that you were being safe, because if they gave you a really good grade for something that appeared like there was a hole in your care, like that's not what this particular piece of work is for. Okay. So when it comes to the evaluate and analysis bit, so we've talked about critical analysis in terms of essay writing, but in terms of the reflections in the essay that you were going to do, Luana, but it's basically just essay writing. So the same stuff that you would do for an assignment, it's very much pulling on that. So I think of reflections as doing qualitative research on myself. So I use myself as a small case study, and I pay attention to it, and I pull out the things that occurred and everything we've talked about. And then added to that, augmented to that, is an evaluate and analysis bit, just like you would do for essay writing. So you've got your research, you've got your like spine, which is what happened, and then you're like, okay, so this bit happened because of this reason, and I can pull on this bit of research that I think is valuable for this reason and not so valuable for this reason. But we could look at that from a whole different point of view and say this is not true. Like, it's just that little dance that you do with the evidence, and then coming to some conclusion about what you would do next time is the action plan bit, and that is often the conclusion as well. So that action plan at the end. But you can go back to I've got a whole, when we did the webinar on essay writing, that might be quite helpful in terms of writing a long form assignment for reflections. I keep being followed around by people called Eleanor at the moment. Like, my name is Eleanor. I've gone back to being Eleanor at work because 10 to 20% of our students are called Ellie at the moment. My mum is thrilled by this, but also I wish I could show you a picture, but I don't have permission. My friend brought her 4-month-old round yesterday, and this child is called Eleanor, and she's like on the 2nd centile or something. She's this little dinky doll-like creature. But anyway, Eleanor Roosevelt we have here, another interesting Eleanor. So Action was key to everything she did. Words mattered, and she expressed herself in plain, simple, beautiful, clean language. So this is what you should be aiming for when you're writing an assignment, by the way. But they were not finally as important as doing something. The phrase that Eleanor Roosevelt brought everywhere she went was what can be done. And this is the key thing about reflections. You might come to a conclusion on research analysis assignments or other kinds of assignments about what should be done in the research, but like this is a very immediate, personal to you, like what is the next stage? What can I show them? How am I progressing in my practice? And that's what you're aiming for the action plan.